Does doing cold exposure make you produce UV light in your mitochondria? The answer is no. And why not? For starters, if it did make you produce UV light in your mitochondria, you will get vitamin D from doing cold exposure, which is not the case. Well, actually, there is this study showing that people who are both healthy and have multiple sclerosis, when they do cold exposure, they get vitamin D. They produce vitamin D from doing cold exposure. This, there's an entire study about it. Wrong. If you look at the study, then there's a caveat. People who had multiple sclerosis had a rise of 10 milligrams per deciliter of vitamin D in their blood, which is very significant. I agree. After doing 20 sessions of cryotherapy in minus 120 degrees, they raised their vitamin D levels by 10 milligrams per deciliter. And your optimal range should be at least 60 milligrams per deciliter. Well then, raising it by 10 milligrams, that's a lot. Then what do you mean that it doesn't make you produce vitamin D? Well, the caveat is that people with multiple sclerosis had this result. People who were healthy in this study, after doing the same 20 sessions of minus 120 degrees cryotherapy, they had rise of, drum roll please, 2 milligrams of vitamin D per deciliter. 2 milligrams per deciliter of vitamin D. And if you're supposed to have 60 milligrams of vitamin D per deciliter, then 2 milligrams is completely insignificant increase. Now, how come people with multiple sclerosis rise by 10 milligrams and people who are healthy only by 2 milligrams? Is it because people with multiple sclerosis have this secret superpower that they can produce way more vitamin D from cold exposure than healthy people? Like, imagine God gives you the option to have multiple sclerosis and like, yes, you will be sicker, your body will work worse, your entire life will be worse. But you will have a superpower. You will have this like power of making more vitamin D from cold exposure than healthy people. So you might be sicker than healthy people, but you will gain this edge over them, that your body will suddenly become way better at creating vitamin D from doing cold exposure. That's very unlikely. Why would someone sick be better at producing vitamin D from cold exposure? The probable case is that this cold exposure doesn't make you produce vitamin D. It makes you release stored vitamin D. This is the case, and I will get into it a bit later. But, no, actually, yeah. Hold on. My notes are a mess. Okay. There are studies showing that people who exercise have higher vitamin D levels than those who don't. If people exercise during the winter, then their decline in vitamin D levels is way lower than people who don't exercise. Because when you exercise, you release stored vitamin D from your tissues. And I've talked to people about it. I've talked to Excellent Health about it. I was like, yeah, exercise makes you release stored vitamin D, sure. But cold exposure does it as well. And I asked them, yeah, but cold exposure is supposed to produce vitamin D, not release vitamin D. And he said, yeah, it does produce vitamin D, that's the basis. But it also makes you release stored vitamin D, just like exercise. Because exercise makes you burn fat and everything, which makes you access the triglycerides in the fat and in your tissues. So it makes you release vitamin D, which is stored. Cold exposure burns fat. Therefore, it also makes you release stored vitamin D, just like exercise. Well, if cold exposure makes you release vitamin D, then how do we know that the vitamin D, which we see rising from doing cold exposure, is being produced and not just released? It's way more likely that it's being released than produced, because otherwise, how would you explain the thing, which is more likely, that people with multiple sclerosis have a superpower which makes them way better than healthy people at producing vitamin D from doing cold exposure? Like, think about it. Everything about bodies with people who have multiple sclerosis is worse than with healthy people. But expect cold exposure. they have this one slight edge that it makes them 5 times better at producing vitamin D from doing cold exposure? Or is it perhaps more likely that for some reason people with multiple sclerosis have more stored vitamin D? Like, let's say they have more problems with vitamin D levels. Like, the lower vitamin D levels you have, the more likely you are going to get multiple sclerosis. That's why people there is less multiple sclerosis near the tropics than in the higher latitudes, where white people like me with blonde hair and blue eyes live. It's possible that people with multiple sclerosis, for some reason, have some issue using vitamin D in their bodies, which makes their bodies store the vitamin D more. Or maybe they are sick in some way and the vitamin D is stored in their tissues in order to repair these tissues or do something in these tissues. And by doing cold exposure, you stop that, and instead of doing the work in these tissues it was meant to do, you just release it into the bloodstream. Anyway, I just think it's more reasonable that people with multiple sclerosis just release more vitamin D than produce more vitamin D than people who are healthy. And even if they did actually produce the vitamin D and not just release it, which is very unlikely, if you are healthy and don't have multiple sclerosis, then you will increase your vitamin D levels by 2 milligrams per deciliter after 20 sessions of doing minus 120 degrees. When I asked Excellent Health about this, he told me, well, first, vitamin D from doing cold exposure is harder to measure. I did a joke before, but yeah, vitamin D from doing produced by doing cold exposure is harder to measure. I did this joke before, but I let it want to sink in. This is my unicorn. He's invisible, so he is hard to measure, but he is there. Unbelievable. But he also told me, 2 milligrams per deciliter from doing 20 sessions of minus 120 degrees, that's not enough, yeah. If you do more cold exposure, then you will get more vitamin D from it. You should do an ice bath and cold shower and 1 hour walk shirtless outside every day in the winter to get in vitamin D. So, yeah, minus 120 degrees, 20 times, not enough. That's not enough. You need to literally freeze to death to have enough vitamin D from it to compare it with walking outside shirtless for 15 minutes in the spring. First, you only release the vitamin D. You don't produce it. And if you do produce it, then how do we know that exercising makes you release vitamin D and not producing it? Actually, when I exercise, I feel very, very warm. When I exercise, I feel very hot and I sweat, just like I was in the sun. So when I exercise, maybe I don't release stored vitamin D. Maybe I'm producing UV light, and that's why I feel so warm during exercise, and it makes me produce vitamin D. Yeah, there's this study, I talked about it in my last video, or the video I will post after this, I don't care, whatever. I didn't post it yet. Or maybe I did from your timeline, but I recorded it, how much was it? 8 minutes ago. So, there's this study showing that doing one bout of exercise, and I don't know if it was bodybuilding, running, or whatever, but one single bout of exercise, it raises your vitamin D levels in the same amount as 20 cryotherapy sessions do. Like, these people who did 20 sessions of cryotherapy, they had the same amount of vitamin D increase the same amount of vitamin D release from 20 sessions of cryotherapy, like the people in this other study who did one bout of exercise. They got same amount, if not more, vitamin D. Like, okay, in the exercise study, it wasn't actually measured in milligrams per deciliter, so it wasn't 100% as I say, but it was raise of 4%. If your vitamin D levels are 60 milligrams per deciliter as they should be, then doing one bout of exercise will give you more vitamin D, 4%, which is like 2.4 milligrams per deciliter. Doing one bout of exercise is more effective than doing 20 sessions of cryotherapy. And maybe they experienced the rise before they did 20 sessions. Maybe they experienced this rise after each session, then it dropped. Well, in that case, if that's the case, then it's still less effective than doing exercise, or as effective as doing exercise. Basically, there is no proof that the vitamin D is being produced rather than just released. And doing any physical activity which makes you burn fat will make you release stored vitamin D. That's true for cold exposure and that's true for exercise. So maybe cold exposure makes you produce vitamin D, but it also makes you release vitamin D. Then how do we know which is stored, which is released, and which is being produced? And even if all of it, if there was no vitamin D being released, and all of it was actually being produced, which is very unlikely because you burn fat and there's vitamin D in it which you will release. But if all of it was produced, then still, the amount of vitamin D is insignificant. 2 milligrams per deciliter after 20 sessions of cryotherapy of minus 120 degrees. Yeah, go freeze to death, and maybe you'll have enough vitamin D from it for it to be significant. But my guess, my rational conclusion is that it doesn't make you produce vitamin D. There's nothing to prove it is being released. That's probably the case. Now, yeah, another thing is that if cold exposure did produce if cold exposure made our mitochondria emit UV light, we will get tan from doing cold exposure. Promiň, matko země. Excuse me. I just had fucking mucus in myself. It wasn't like disrespectful or anything to do that. I just randomly wanted to spit it out, and I'm too lazy to edit the video. That's why instead of like reading something from a paper and then doing 20 cuts, I will just read it straight from my script and not edit it out. Because I don't care if you care. I'm here to make a point, not to make entertaining YouTube videos. There is an argument that, first, cold exposure makes you release alpha MSH in your bloodstream, which is a gene which you activate in order to get tan, alpha MSH. Maybe it does, maybe. But again, the same as with as with vitamin D. How do we know it's being produced and not released? I don't. Maybe it's being produced. Okay, but I find it unlikely. Just like with vitamin D, it's reasonable to assume it's being released for whatever reason and not produced. And if it's being produced, then it doesn't necessarily mean that it's here to get us tan. I don't know. Yeah, I will stick to the point it's likely being released and not produced. Now, we should get tan from doing cold exposure, and I've heard this actually convincing and pretty good argument from Excellent Health about Eskimos. Like, the paradigm is that Eskimos are tan and dark because sunlight is being reflected by snow, which they have way more of than we do. And he said a good point. Yeah, that is the case. Snow will literally double the UV index of sunlight, but that's very low. In the Arctic Circle, you have UV index of like 1 or less, which will never get you tan. And if you double it from the snow, then it will only make it like 1 or 2, which is still not enough to make you as tan as Eskimos are. I absolutely respect this argument, and I may be able to like say, okay, then they are not tan because of reflected sunlight from snow. Maybe. But he then claims that they are tan from doing cold exposure, because he says that in their clothes, it's cold in their clothes. That if you put a Westerner in Eskimos clothing, they will think it's not enough and they will still feel cold, which means they continuously do cold exposure. They feel cold all of the time in their clothes. And also they don't have gloves, and their faces and hands, just like me, are being exposed to the cold all of the time. And if you get exposed to that amount of cold, yes, you will get tan, he says. Well, first I would like to say, did Jones live with the Eskimos to judge whether their clothing was warm or not? Like, I didn't. I cannot say that clothing of the Eskimos was warm because I didn't live with the Eskimos. But do you know who can? Agenus. Agenus lived with the Inuits, and in one of fucking 20 million workshops which he made, I believe it was like first or second installment in his series The School of Life, which you can find on his archive, which is like on Telegram or on YouTube, on some YouTube channels. The School of Life, like the second or first installment in that series. It's like 6 hour-long videos. Hour-long videos, and there's 6 of them. Then he talks about he living with Eskimos, and probably in more workshops when he talked about his life story. But when he lived with the Eskimos with the Inuit, when he ate that rotten whale, which Loki almost didn't save his life, but it was an important event in his history. If you don't know the story of Agenus, how he was with the Eskimos and he ate the rotten, it's a long story. It's really cool. You guys should fucking hear some Agenus workshop and hear about his story. Very, very fucking cool. But he lived with the Eskimos and he told about, yeah, in their clothing, you will feel like you are boiling. Like, it's too warm in their skins. Like, they turn these skins, like, with the nice part, they turn it inside, like upside down. And it just makes them ultra warm inside of their clothing. So, I don't know, I wasn't there. I cannot judge if their clothing is warm or if it's cold inside. But I don't know, Agenus said it was warm as fuck, and he lived with the Eskimos. Then Jones, who didn't live with the Eskimos, said it's cold. I don't know, but if I had to guess that one of them was right, then I would guess it's the guy who lived with the Eskimos. Or maybe it's not uniform, maybe there are cultures where they actually do feel cold in their whatever. That's a side point. It's not actually that important. What is important is the thing that Eskimos are supposedly tan because of the amount of cold exposure they do. Well, okay, then if you can get tan doing cold exposure, show me a white person who is pale, who then gets dark by doing cold exposure. You can show me someone who is very tan from the summer and does a lot of cold exposure as a quantum biologist, and he's tan. Or say that, yeah, I'm a quantum biologist and I don't lose my tan thanks to doing cold exposure or something. But I've known people who never did cold exposure, and they were in the sun all summer, and they eat raw animal-based diet, and that's including myself. And then during the winter, they almost never lose their tan. They hold their tan for a long time with never doing cold exposure. Then there are people who do cold exposure and they hold their tan as well. You can hold your tan in the winter, despite doing cold. I mean, if you do cold exposure and if you don't do cold exposure, therefore maybe it can help you maintain your tan, even though you can maintain your tan even without ever doing cold exposure. And maybe it does something, maybe it doesn't, but that's not relevant. If it did produce UV light, the cold exposure, it wouldn't just help you maintain the tan, which you can maintain without doing cold exposure. It would as well allow you to get tan. If it produced UV light, you will be able to get tan from doing cold exposure alone. You should be able to take someone who is completely pale, no sunlight, no anything, and get them tan just by doing cold exposure. Maybe you can do it, but until you show me someone who is completely pale and gets tan from no sunlight, but only doing cold exposure, then it's not reasonable for me to believe that cold exposure gets you tan. Yes, you have the Eskimos, and I don't know, probably genetics. Maybe these people are just genetically more dark. And yes, there was this argument that you can get someone who is dark-skinned, and you can get them to Europe or to some higher latitudes where people with blue eyes like me live, and then they get pretty pale when they don't get sunlight. Therefore, Eskimos should also be pale because they don't get any sunlight. But I don't know. I don't know why they are so tan. Maybe it is from the sunlight being reflected from snow. Maybe it's not. But still, it's completely different people who are like it's dark. It's people with a darker skin and different genes than us. If you took a white person and you made them live with the Eskimos, then I don't think they will get tan from doing only cold exposure. Like, show me a white person who gets tan by doing cold exposure alone, no sunlight. Now, let's assume that the Eskimos are actually tan from doing cold exposure. I don't think it's likely. I think it's just because they are different people with different skins than white people, and that white people cannot get tan by simply doing cold exposure. But let's assume Eskimos are tan from doing cold exposure. Well, they live in like minus 50 degrees, and they expose their face constantly to minus 50 degrees. If you want to replicate getting tan from doing only cold exposure, I think it's very unlikely that you will succeed. Let's say you can get tan from doing cold exposure, but still you will not get tan from doing cold exposure. Like, even if you were a Wim Hof, then you will not get tan from cold exposure alone, because you need more cold exposure to get tan. Like, Eskimos get minus 50 degrees constantly on their face, which allows them to get tan face. Well, if you need that much cold to get tan, then even doing an ice bath is like for like few minutes a day. That's like nothing. That will not give you enough cold to get you tan in that case. Like, how would I put this into words? Like, the amount of cold you need to produce UV light enough to get you tan, it makes almost any amount of cold exposure you do insignificant, and you don't produce enough UV light. Like, getting outside in a UV index 2 or 3 in the spring will get you more tan than doing a 10-minute ice bath in 5 degrees Celsius or less. The amount of cold exposure you need to do to get tan has to be so high that you will fucking freeze to death in order to get a fraction of the UV light created, to compare to being outside in a UV index 3 for a few minutes shirtless in the spring. It's just not worth it. Now, this is going to be kind of funny, but it's actually my best argument about cold exposure not creating UV light. Like, you will think I'm trolling or something, but it's libido. Especially, let's spill the beans, sunning your balls. If you sun your balls, your libido will be way higher. And why do I bring it up? You know, I do two things. I sun my balls, and I don't masturbate. Yeah, that's a long topic. I might make a video about it. Like, people who follow Agenus and Goatis and whatever will tell you not masturbating is unnatural and you need to do it because it's healthy and whatever. But if you don't do it, you have higher testosterone, and if you don't do it, you are hornier, which means you have higher testosterone, and having higher testosterone is healthier and makes your life more fun. And also, I have some dignity. Like, even if it was healthy, you have more dignity if you don't do it than if you do it. And I have a lot of esoteric Hyperborean wisdom reasons for not doing it. Shout out to Robert Sepper, whatever. I just don't do it. And when you don't masturbate, then you get this thing called wet dreams, when you wake up wet from ejaculating in your sleep. When you sun your balls, it often is the case that happens as well. If you don't masturbate and you sun your balls as well, if you do these two things, then wet dreams happen pretty often. Now, why I bring it up is that I found that whenever I sun my balls, it's like 20 times more likely that I will have a wet dream that night than if I don't. And I talked about this in context of UV light with other people. Basically, also there are studies showing that UV light makes you increase your levels of testosterone and libido and everything. And a study from the 40s showing that you release sex steroid hormones from putting UV light on your testicles. UV light makes you increase your testosterone. If you put it on the area of your body which creates testosterone on your Leydig cells, also it's not just UV light, then you get the infrared light, which makes your cells which produce testosterone work better as well. You have a bunch of things in sunlight. They make you produce more testosterone. And when you don't masturbate, and then you sun your balls, it's very likely you will have a wet dream that night. Now, why do I bring this up in a video about cold exposure? When I do this in middle of the winter, when it's very sunny, not like now, but when it's bright blue sky in the middle of the winter, and it's very sunny, and the UV index is like 1, like completely low, it will not get you tan at all. This still happens. When I sun my balls in December, when it's sunny, then it's more likely, way more likely, that I will get a wet dream than if I don't. And also, the increase in my libido from sunning my balls for, 15-20 minutes in the sunlight in the December, when it's UV index 1, the libido increase is significant and you can notice it. That's UV index 1. That's not enough to get you tan. That's very, very little amount of UV light. And still, when applied to your private parts, it will significantly increase my libido. And not just mine, it's other people in my circle report it as well. Therefore, you need very, 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 very little of amount of UV light to get this effect, which UV light does. Yet, when I do an ice bath, this year I did a lot of cold exposure. When I go and it's 5 degrees outside, and I go in a river which is 6 degrees or something like that, and I stay there, my entire body, of course my testicles included, I stay there for like a minute, not like a minute, but less. But when I do insane amount of cold exposure, I never get this raise in libido, and I never get this raise in the probability of having a wet dream. The insane amount of cold you get from doing 5 degrees cold water for several tenths of seconds on your entire body, or also being outside shirtless for an hour or longer in 6 degrees outside, that's quite a lot of cold exposure. And in theory, it should produce quite a lot of UV light. And this cold water this cold water also affected my testicles. Therefore, it should be creating UV light in my testicles as well. Yet this insane amount of cold exposure doesn't increase my libido one bit. Yet, having UV index 1 sunlight in middle of December, it's not even warm, hit my testicles for 20 minutes, it significantly increases my libido. So, either cold exposure doesn't create UV light, or if it does, then doing cold exposure, like doing an ice bath for 30 seconds in water which is below 5 degrees, makes you produce less UV light than getting 5 minutes or 20 minutes of UV index 1 sunlight. Like, the small amount of sunlight you get in December, if it's clear sky outside, it's stronger in terms of increasing your libido than doing insane, stressful amounts of cold exposure. That small amount of sunlight, which you would believe is not enough, is still stronger in increasing your libido than the all cold exposure in the world which you can do. Therefore, it's just so insignificant, the amount of UV you create from doing cold exposure, it's laughable. And that's assuming you do create it. If you don't create it, then that'll explain why you don't even get the effects of getting UV light. How the 30 minutes, it's going to be a lot longer. Now you can say that, oh yeah, actually cold exposure does create UV light, but it just so happens that the UV light which is being created doesn't have the effects which UV light from sunlight would have, like the libido. The UV light from the cold exposure, it doesn't increase your libido, but it does everything else which UV light does, okay? That's unlikely. Then I disprove another thing, and it's like, okay, it doesn't do these two things, but it does everything else. Just, come on. Come on, man. Okay, another thing. Cold exposure creates beta endorphin, which sunlight does. Like endorphins, the things which make you feel good. Cold exposure does create them. Maybe it does create them, maybe it releases them to reward you for escaping death, which is exactly the same thing with exercise. If you do a bodybuilding workout in the gym, then afterwards you will be full of beta endorphin, where your body is rewarding you for either doing some physical activity and moving and doing a good job, or for escaping death and having that painful, stressful physical thing behind you. The same case is with cold exposure, I believe. It makes you release beta endorphin to reward you, like, yeah, you survived. Here, have some happy chemicals for a reward. Which is the same case with exercise. Maybe it doesn't just release beta endorphin. Maybe it makes you produce beta endorphin. But in that case, exercising makes you produce beta endorphin as well. Actually, I feel very warm during exercising. When I exercise, it must be the case that I create UV light, because then I feel warm, and it must be the case. And therefore, it also creates beta endorphin. Whatever. You understand. Beta endorphin is something your body releases after a workout to reward yourself for not dying. The same case is likely with cold exposure. Then what it also creates is dopamine. And okay, I will give you that. Cold exposure makes you release dopamine, which is good if you are depressed or something. But I will talk about it more later in the video. But again, how do we know it's being produced and not released? Okay, maybe it's being produced, maybe released, whatever. But the case is, it also makes you release/produce a fuck ton of cortisol. Okay, the cortisol, if you get used to it, actually drops, but you still do produce it in significant amounts. But it makes you produce a lot of adrenaline and noradrenaline. And whenever you raise your adrenaline or noradrenaline, you also increase your dopamine. When someone pulls out a knife on you, or you get into a car crash, or something like that, you are running from an animal, then your adrenaline and noradrenaline will rise. And almost all of the time, when your adrenaline and the noradrenaline rises, your dopamine raises as well. What is dopamine? It's like your motivation molecule. It's your motivation for life. Like, yeah, let's do this. Let's get this. Let's win. Let's do that thing. Let's move. Let's get out from the bed and do something useful in our life. That's what dopamine does. If I talk to you like, cold exposure is actually unhealthy, then that means I have low dopamine. If I talk to you, cold exposure is not actually fucking healthy, then that's a high dopamine behavior. Well, if you do cold exposure, your dopamine increases, but your adrenaline and noradrenaline as well. And what I'm saying, whenever you are in states, when you are near death, when you can die, when you need to escape death, when you are stressed, when high stress situation basically, and your adrenaline and noradrenaline rises, then your dopamine will rise as well. So maybe, yeah, your dopamine rises with cold exposure, but it's in accordance with the, basically, if you stay too long in the cold water, you will fucking die. And your body gives you a shock of stress hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline, and that will make you automatically raise dopamine as well, because your adrenaline and noradrenaline system will always raise your dopamine as well when it's activated, or nearly always. And it's actually, it makes sense that you get dopamine from doing a cold shower, because your body wants you to not die, and it gives you a hormone which pushes you like, okay, let's do this, let's work, let's escape death, let's do something about this cold water so we don't freeze to death. When we get out of this cold water, we need to do something like, or I need to survive. Like the amount of shock you get, it's understandable you will get dopamine rise from it. So you like have the motivation to survive and to get out of there. Like if you get into a water which is so cold you could die in it if you stay too long, do you think you will survive with no dopamine? Like, oh yeah, I'm in cold water, whatever. My hormones are the same. I don't feel any drive to get out. I don't feel any burst of energy which will allow me to survive this. I don't care. I'm in cold water. Whatever. Yeah. My limbs are getting kind of limp and I don't feel them. But I don't feel any stress, so I don't care. And then you are dead. You need all of that adrenaline and dopamine to get you moving so you don't freeze. Oh, this is my favorite one. When I see comments at videos of excellent health, like, but cold exposure is kind of stressful. Why should we do it? Then he says, watch my cold exposure video, and it will prove that it's not stressful. No, you should watch his healthy day of living in cold north video. That's better. Because in that video, he submerges his head in the cold water. Then he gets it out and he says, oh, brain freeze. I did cold exposure in as cold water as he did. Do you know what the brain freeze is when you submerge your head in the cold water? Brain freeze is when the cold temperature literally causes a physical sensation of pain in your head. And when you get your head out of the cold water, it then like goes away. Then you again submerge your head and it hurts again. Like the cold literally causes a physical sensation of pain. Like even if you like put your hands for too long in some cold water, or you hold ice or something on your skin, then you feel it kind of burn. You just cold literally causes you physical sensation of pain. Like let's pretend cold exposure is healthy. Even if it's so, it still causes literal physical sensation of pain in your body. And even if you are cold adapted, it's obviously less than if you are not. But even Jones, who is extremely cold adapted, he can literally walk shirtless in Sweden in winter and not feel cold. And I believe him. I believe you can get as cold adapted as that. Okay, more power to him. But even someone as cold adapted as him still literally experiences the physical sensation of pain from cold when he submerges his head in water. And then going away from the cold alleviates the physical sensation of pain. Cold exposure might still be healthy, but it's literally stressful. Like, stop saying, Jones, please, watch my YouTube video about cold exposure. It will prove that it's not actually stressful. You should say something like, okay, it's literally stressful. It literally causes you the physical sensation of pain. And staying away from it will save you from the pain. But despite this amount of stress, it's healthy. Saying it's healthy, it's stressful, but it's still healthy. I could believe that. I can believe something which is stressful is healthy, okay. But saying it's not stressful because it's healthy, that's so ignorant to say. It's literally stressful. Like, what is pain if not stress? Like, it causes you pain. If you do it for too long, you will literally die. Your body has to warm itself up, because if its temperature goes too low, it will literally die. So the effects of your body warming itself up, which is beneficial, and all of that, even if you produce UV light, then your body produces UV light and warms itself up in order to avoid death. And that literally causes you pain, and that makes you literally increase the amount of hormones in your blood which are related to stress. Like, it literally raises your stress hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. It causes you pain. It it has any effects it has because your body is warming itself up to avoid death. And it's raising your stress hormones. And you are saying it's not stressful. Hello, wake up. It might be healthy. But to say it's not stressful, it's like saying, let's say I kick you in the balls and you get $20 million for it. If you do the equation, then it's actually healthy for you to get kicked in the balls because of the $20 million, you will never have to work again. You will never have to exert yourself again. You can use that money to buy a home in the tropics and to buy the best and healthiest food ever. So the upside of getting kicked in the balls and being paid $20 million for it is way higher than the pain of being kicked in the balls. So I could tell you like, yeah, if I kick you in the balls, it's not stressful because overall it's a net benefit. The $20 million you will get, it's a net benefit. So it's not actually stressful. Yes, it might be the case that in that case it will be beneficial to get kicked in the balls. But being kicked in the balls is still stressful. Doing cold exposure is stressful, even if it's not healthy. Like, try to throw someone in cold water or a dog in cold water. And I'm not saying cold like 10 degrees in spring. I'm saying make a hole in the ice and throw a dog in there against his will. And tell him, it's not actually stressful, it's healthy for your mitochondria. Throw a person in cold water and tell them, oh, it's not stressful. I don't know, you're just imagining it being stressful or something. It fucking is stressful. It is so ignorant to say it's not. Come on. Yeah, the increased breathing as well. When you get your back in the cold water and you are gasping for air, that's a sign of no stress. Gasping for air, no stress. Yeah, sure. Then, yeah, you might say that it helps. Cold exposure helps to alleviate brain fog, which is cool, I guess. Yeah, sure. Like, if your body is full of stress hormones and it's trying to not die, then you will lose some brain fog. That's obvious, sort of. Then, needless to say, cold exposure burns fat. So, if you are someone fat and you want to lose fat, then I would actually advise to do cold exposure. Like, cold exposure is one of the best things for losing fat, I would say, honestly. Like, it increases your metabolism, it increases your sugar burning and everything, yeah. But if you are skinny and trying to gain weight, then doing cold exposure is nonsense. It will make you lose weight. It will make you not... Maybe it will make you better at burning fat from ketosis. Like, if you're in a ketogenic diet and you do some cold exposure, maybe you will be better at burning fat. That might be beneficial in some way, whatever. But if you're skinny, then don't do cold exposure because it will make it way harder for you to put on weight. And you want to have plenty of weight on you to protect your nerves are all coated in myelin sheets, and that's another thing which now I have to explain. Come on, like, all of your nerves are coated in myelin sheet. The more, which is like protective sheath of your nerves. The more fat you eat and the more fat you have on your body, the more your nerves and your brain are protected by this fatty myelin sheath. And even Jack Kruse talks about it. It's beneficial to have myelin sheath around your nerves. The fatter you are and the more fat you eat, and the less fat you waste burning to warm yourself up from cold exposure, the more your nerves will be protected from EMFs and from toxins and other things in your myelin sheath, because you will have more fat and you want to have plenty of fat. But yeah, the very important thing is, I believe there are studies showing that, I have plenty of mucus because of the cold weather, because fuck cold exposure. Promiň, matko země. If you aren't Czech, you will not know what I say each time I spit. And I don't do it only on camera, I do it all my life. I say promiň, matko země each time I spit. Oh, you guys must be so curious. What the fuck am I just saying? Yeah. Doing cold exposure decreases your protein muscle synthesis. Like, when you work out and then you do a cold shower, then your muscles will grow less from that workout than if you don't do the cold shower. I've heard someone bring this up in comments of Excellent Health, and he was like, "Oh yeah, actually, we don't need muscles to be healthy. Therefore, having less muscles from cold exposure, that's okay. That's not of a concern. Actually, it's healthier to have less muscle because then we have less mitochondrial density in your muscles, and we can keep more of our mitochondria in your brain and in our hearts. Therefore, it's fine that cold exposure decreases the amount of muscle we grow." Well, it might be true that we can benefit from having less muscles and more muscles, but he failed to see the whole picture. It's not about like, oh yeah, having less muscle is better for us, therefore it's healthy to do cold exposure. No, he missed the point. It's not that cold exposure makes you have less muscles, and having less muscles is better, therefore cold exposure is good in this case. No, it's that when you apply stress to grow a muscle, and your body wants to grow a muscle, and then you apply cold exposure to it, then it will grow less of that muscle it was planning to grow. It will make it harder for your body to grow muscles. How would I word it, actually? It's like cold exposure makes your tissues worse at recovering. If you do a workout, you put a stress on your muscle, then your body will recover and it will grow some muscle and some tissue in that part which was damaged in the stress. If you apply cold exposure in there, the muscle will not recover as well. It will not recover to grow as big and strong as it was supposed to recover. Cold exposure makes your tissues heal less. It makes them less able to recover and less able to adapt to stress of lifting weights and whatever. Now, lifting weights and growing muscle might not be beneficial, but if you experience a stress which damages your muscle, then doing cold exposure makes your muscle recover less from it. It makes it grow smaller and not as strong as doing cold exposure. And you might say, well, cold exposure makes you produce more, make your mitochondria stronger, which will make you stronger. Like, yeah, I will talk about it later. Maybe cold exposure does make your mitochondria better. And I can imagine someone going outside without gloves and having his hands freeze to death all of the time, having a stronger handshake than someone who doesn't. That's possible. But if you do heavy physical labor on a farm like I do, or you work out, and then you put cold exposure on that damaged muscle, the muscle will not recover to be as strong or big and strong as if you would put warm it. Like there's this experiment that I don't want to do, but if anyone here works out and is open-minded to try it, you can do it. Like get barbells, dumbbells, and do like bicep curls or something till failure. And on one bicep, place an ice pack after every workout. And on one bicep, place a hot water bottle every workout. The hot water will just increase circulation and healing. It will feel relaxing. It will feel better. If you put ice on the damaged muscle, it will numb pain, and then it will recover less. It will not be as strong. It makes you recover and heal less. It only numbs pain. Now, another argument is that our bones are semiconductors, because there's this book, Body Electric. I read it. It's cool. Basically, when you put electricity in your bones, it will stimulate recovery or something, because we are semiconducting beings or something. Yeah, cold exposure is supposedly good because we are made out of semiconductors, and during cold, these semiconductors transmit electricity better. That might be the case. However, it might be the case that semiconductors and electricity works better during cold, but have you ever got your hands cold? Like really cold, like I do right now. Like, when your hand gets really cold, try to move it. Try to like write with it, try to like move your like fingers and everything. Do you feel like your body can communicate better or worse with your hand. Because like my movement is slower. The signals I send from my brain to do with my hand, they like aren't as effective. Like I cannot sense the hand as well. It like I communicate way worse with my hand when it's cold. Like maybe electricity works better when it's colder. That's why your phone gets when it gets overheated it doesn't work. And when it's get cold it works. But we are yes, sure. We do have nerves and we have semiconductor bones and we are electrical beings and all that, yeah, sure, but we are biological organisms made of tissues. And if you are cold, then you can just feel that your tissues are recovering and communicating worse than if they were like warm. Like if you are warm, you feel your tissues better and more in detail than when you are cold and you barely feel them. And sending signals to your hand is just I believe you understand what I'm trying to say. If you get your hands really cold, you communicate with them like way worse. Even though we are supposed to communicate with them better because they are cold. Because we are not purely electronic devices. We are biological beings and you know, like when you put a tea bag in cold water versus warm water and you see the things travel and move and spread faster in the warm water, I believe that's more of what is happening inside of our bodies. Like, you know that wearing plastic and polyester will put microplastics inside of your skin. What do you think is worse? Wearing polyester plastic clothing in winter when it's cold, or putting polyester plastic clothing on yourself when you are warm, very warm. When do you think you will get more microplastic inside of yourself? When you are warm. Because when you are warm, your tissues, everything which is alive, it just somewhat communicates better, it spreads better, it just transmits better. Like we are not electronic devices. We are made out of animal tissue. We just fucking things work and travel and communicate with each other better when it's warm. At least intuitively, I feel like that. And I can tell for sure the difference between having a cold hand versus warm hand. Another thing which I remembered is that when you drink or eat something cold, like a sauce, it has no taste. Almost no taste. When you take sauce, which has no taste when it's cold, and you warm it up, it suddenly has taste. Same with raw meat actually. When you eat raw meat really cold, it has almost no taste. When you eat it in room temperature, it has more taste. Like you can sense the things in the food better when it's warmer. Like everything just communicates better with each other when it's warmer. That's how life works, it seems like. I don't know, I seem to feel like it's I can observe it in many cases, like the only way when it's the opposite, it's like with electricity and electronics. Like yeah, okay, our bones might be semiconductors and they may benefit from cold exposure. But anyway, one of the main benefits of cold exposure is producing light and whatever from warming yourself up. So actually, if you do cold exposure, then afterwards, your body temperature will rise and you will be warmer than before you did the cold exposure. Therefore, these semiconductors will actually have a harder time communicating with each other than before the cold exposure. Then how is actual cold exposure beneficial for your semiconductors? If you let them communicate better for a while, but then you warm up and they communicate worse than before because now it's warmer and it's worse for them. I don't know, I just think it's not temperature and semiconductors, it's just not significant enough in the temperatures in which our bodies move in. Unless you live in like fucking desert, then you can get too warm and then there might be some noticeable effects which is related to semiconductor bones. Whatever. But yeah, actually, you can say that cold exposure is proven to be good because it makes mitochondria produce light. Like when you do cold exposure, your mitochondria produce light. Sure, but your mitochondria produce light anytime they exert themselves and they need to like produce energy. Like when you exercise and you get warm, your mitochondria also produce light. When you do a hot bath or sauna or something like that, then your mitochondria still produce light in order to cope with the stress which you are being exposed to. And of course your mitochondria produce light. You force them to produce light to warm your body up because your body needs to have a certain, if it goes below a certain temperature, you will fucking die. Therefore your mitochondria need to work their ass off so you don't die from the cold. That's what creates the light, but you might as well just work out because when you feel warmer, doing cold exposure or working out, like okay, few hours after cold exposure, you will feel getting warmer because your body wants to warm itself up. It actually feels pretty unpleasant. It feels like a fever. I still want to be in warm clothing, but then my skin is warm and I feel unpleasant. Your body temperature rising from cold exposure literally feels like a fever. Maybe for some people it doesn't, but for me it feels like a fever. It's unpleasant. When I work out, then I sweat. It feels pleasant. I feel getting warmer. Like my body temperature is getting warmer. My mitochondria are still producing light, if even mitochondria exist or whatever. Like there is this video from Goatis about Jack Cruz, which brought up an argument about mitochondria not even probably being real, because in order to see them under a microscope, you need to do a bunch of. It's not my argument. It might be possible that he might be right. Whatever. Let's assume mitochondria exist. Well, still, I can produce light and warm my body up by doing exercise. And I feel, when do you feel more like you are in sunlight? Like, when do you feel like you are recreating sunlight? When you are freezing your ass off, or when you are working out, that you are sweating, and do you feel warm, like on a summer noon? That feels more like sunlight to me. And as in regards with vitamin D being released, then exercise does the same amount as cold exposure. Getting tan from the cold exposure, well, it doesn't get you tan at all unless you're an Eskimo. Therefore, exercise is just as ineffective at getting you tan, or just as effective. Just if you want any benefits from doing cold exposure, you can do exercise instead. Expect exercise might be even better because then you are jacked from it or strong. Like yeah, there are I will talk about the practical there are benefits to cold exposure. I will talk about them. But first, yeah, now it's the time. Let me tell you about my story of doing cold exposure. It was in 2020 during the scam where people told us to stay inside. And what I did is that for years straight, even before I found the raw meat, I did only cold showers. I literally did like 5 warm showers in a year. Otherwise, I only did cold showers. I was strict. And I washed myself with shampoo and everything. So I would get cold and wet. Then I would put shampoo all over my body. And then I would thoroughly wash the shampoo from all over my body with cold water. I wouldn't just go into cold water and I would wash my entire body with cold water almost every day, even after workouts. I only did an expansion like 5 days out of a year, and I did it even in winter. I did a lot of cold exposure. Then I thought it would be funny to go outside shirtless in the middle of the winter and see how it goes. And I didn't die, and I actually got a huge adrenaline rush from it. Like, my body is telling me, yo, we are freezing to death, what the fuck? And it raised my dopamine and adrenaline, and I felt really good on it. So I was very depressed during that time, and I wanted to, like, chase away the depression by doing cold exposure, because it temporarily makes you forget your mental pain. Like, I was trying to drown my mental pain in physical pain of doing cold exposure. and it raises your dopamine and adrenaline. It makes you feel better, short term. But it became a drug to me. Like I got literally addicted to the response of cold exposure. Like if I didn't get cold exposure, I would feel depressed, and I was dependent on doing cold exposure to not feel like I want to off myself. I was addicted to it, and it escalated into me running outside at night in the forest, shirtless in the winter, and I had a balaclava on to be more intimidating or something like trousers, balaclava, nothing, and I was running like that in the forests, and it was very funny. Like one time I found a woman and I was shirtless in a balaclava in the middle of the winter. She turned around. I walked to her, and she was probably thinking I'm going to grape her or something. And I was like, I'm 6'5" 6'5" as well, or 6'6" maybe. And I came to her. She was like terrified, looking at me like, what the fuck is this encounter? And I was like, which way is it to civilization, please? And then I went. Or I was running around like a dog, almost at force, and I was making like wolf sounds at the full moon. Like, oh! Crazy stuff like that. I was literally high. I was high of the dopamine and adrenaline, and I enjoyed it a lot. I was doing crazy stuff. And actually, years later, I met a guy with whom I played American football who lived in a nearby village, and he told me, yeah, bro, people in the village were talking like, bro, there is this crazy guy making wolf sounds and running around shirtless in a balaclava in the forests during full moons and whatever. And he told me, yeah, I told these guys, yeah, I know him, that's Circa. It's so funny, like I'm a such a legend. So I did this. I also did like ice baths. Like there's this pool in the garden, and it literally had ice in it. And I just broke it and I bathed in that. Like really cold water. I did insane amounts of cold exposure. The amount of dopamine I was getting from the cold exposure, it was really high. The thing is though, you literally build a tolerance, like on a drug. So doing a cold shower, it didn't make me feel good anymore. So I had to do cold plunge, or I had to run outside shirtless for longer, or go outside at night when it was colder. Like, I literally built a tolerance to it, and I wasn't getting as much dopamine, so I needed harsher and harsher and colder temperatures to give me the dopamine rush, so I could feel better. And I was just addicted to it. Like, without the cold exposure, I would feel completely terrible. And even during the cold exposure, I wouldn't feel good, like happy, like content. I would feel like my life is completely terrible. But right now, I am locked in a flow state, like a wolf which is about to kill something. Like, the cold exposure didn't make me feel happy, but the amount of adrenaline and dopamine, it made me forget that I was in pain. But I was ultra depressed, wanting to off myself a lot of time. Like, why didn't cold exposure heal my depression? It temporarily offset insane amount of mental pain I was in each time I did it, but afterwards it was worse, and I had to rely on it like on a drug. It's very likely that it didn't make me produce dopamine, but it just made me release dopamine, which robbed me of dopamine in the long term. Like, I was robbing myself of future happiness. Like, I was forcing my body to release dopamine, but in the amount which I was doing it, I was just, how would I say, I was destroying my body's resources. I was squeezing myself dry, I could say. And also I had digestive issues and diarrhea all the way through. Like, I had digestive issues and diarrhea for most of my life. And actually raw milk fixed that. But the insane amount of cold exposure, if cold exposure improves your digestion or whatever, then it didn't one bit for me because I still had cramps and diarrhea, even though I did infinite amount of cold exposure basically, and it didn't help me one bit. Just even though drinking raw milk, like even if I'm on a shit diet, if I incorporate one single food, if I drink raw milk, then that completely changes my digestion. Incorporating one food, that's it for food not being important and cold and quantum stuff fixing your gut or whatever. Whatever. hmm Yeah. So eventually, I've developed this thing, which I was very mentally unstable, and when I would be happy, then I will be like, yeah, I'm so happy, I love life. That's us. Like, for example, when I was playing American football, I would catch a ball, and they were like, yeah, I caught it. That's cool. And I was like, fuck yeah, I love life. That's awesome. Then I would literally not catch a ball, and I would feel completely depressed. Like, fuck man, I fucking hate this. I hate my life. I hate everything. I want to run away from everything and just not never be seen by anyone again. Like I was so mentally unstable. I could be very happy at one point, then something would happen, and after 5 seconds, I would be completely in fight or flight mode, depressed, wanting to run away from the situation, and never speak with the people involved again. Randomly, this would happen daily. Like my mental health was in shambles, and I by this time I started to eat raw meat, and I met some primal dieter, and I explained what I was going through, both my digestive issues and my yeah. I also changed my diet to raw meat, but I still had digestive issues. Both my digestive issues, but more importantly, this mental instability, this snapping into fight or flight mode in middle of a second, randomly because any small little thing, even though I was ultra happy 5 seconds before, and he told me that's most likely because I've seen it with people who had adrenal exhaustion. He told me you probably have abused your adrenal glands, which gave you adrenal exhaustion. And he asked me, for how long did you consume caffeine? Like he was assuming that automatically, based on people with whom he's seen this before, like you have abused caffeine a lot, like coffee. Like for how long have you abused caffeine? And actually, I didn't have caffeine for like years at that point. I had like 9 coffees in my entire life at the most. And I hadn't had coffee for years at that point. I didn't even eat chocolate and stuff like that. Like, I didn't eat junk foods, basically no caffeine. So, yeah, I had energy drinks when I was younger, but not that much, actually. Well, anyway, I've had this thing around the time I did a lot of cold exposure, not before. Basically, I told him I did fuck ton of cold exposure, and he was like, yeah, bro, doing cold exposure abuses your adrenal glands, and it's similar to coffee. It stresses you and fills you up with stress hormones. It rapes your adrenal glands. And basically, you probably have adrenal exhaustion because of that. And he told me to eat high meat, which is like, he told me to do several things, like, in regards to food, and one of them was eating high meat, which is like rotten, pre-digested meat, which was supposed to help me somehow. Then also to eat a fuck ton of fat and things I don't want to talk about as well. But basically he told me things which are supposed to fix my adrenal glands. I did them and it fixed that issue. After a long time of doing these things which he recommended to me and not doing cold exposure for a long time, then these issues fixed. I no longer had these mental problems. So it's very likely that I completely destroyed my adrenal glands with doing too much cold exposure. Now, you might be able to do a lot of cold exposure and not have the problems I did. Also, I do cold exposure recently and I never have the problems I did before. Why is that? Likely, it's because when you are healthy, then you can handle cold exposure. Back then I wasn't healthy and I didn't handle cold exposure. it's not that cold exposure makes you healthy. If you are healthy, you can handle it. Like, you need to be healthy in the first place to be able to do cold exposure and to not hurt yourself. That's like why I don't see cold exposure as that significant pillar of health. Even I don't see it significant because back then it either completely destroyed my adrenal glands and my mental health, or maybe it wasn't caused by the cold exposure, but therefore my health was completely destroyed despite doing that high amount of cold exposure. Like, either it fucked up my health, or it absolutely didn't help my health at all, even though I was doing such insane amounts of it. Like, I had winters when I shied away from cold exposure as much as I could, and I exposed myself to warm only. And I was so cold phobic. Yet, I didn't feel depressed almost at all, compared to when I was doing this high amount of cold exposure. It's just, it either fucks you up, or it's not strong enough to help you if you are fucked up, like diet is, because changing my diet or other things, aside from doing cold exposure, these just influenced my body and my health positively so much, unlike cold exposure, which did nothing in the best case, and which destroyed my adrenal glands in the worst case, which I got addicted to like a drug, and abused it to feel better, but after it wore off, just like with a drug, I always felt worse afterwards. No, there was one benefit of doing cold exposure back then. I had less acne when I did cold exposure. Now, maybe it's because cold exposure makes your mitochondria work better, which improves your digestion and improves your skin and gives you less acne. That's a possibility. But it maybe also might be that cold exposure is so stressful, it stops any kind of detox. Like, when your body wants to detox from stuff, like some shit it cannot digest, or some toxins, or something that is stored. If your body wants to get something out of itself through your skin, and you throw it into cold water. Alright, so here we got a pause for comical relief. So what happened? Why is there a black screen? Like, why am I not in the forest anymore? Well, what happened is that my phone stopped recording for no reason. Okay. Then I started recording again. And I recorded for another hour. And after that hour was over, my phone was about to quit because it had no battery. So I turned up the recording and okay, 1 hour of recording, I got it. At the end, I finished with my battery. I literally, as the battery died, I made my last verse and I turned it off. And I went from the forest like hell yeah. And I was there for a long time, my hands were freezing and my core body temperature dropped. Like, I'm not talking you're cold and you whatever. I fucking shivered during the video. I was so tapped out. I was so slow. I was so tired. Like, I was after like a workout. Like, the amount of energy which I expended talking and freezing in that forest. I'm so cold right now. Like, even hour after I came back, I make a video about cold exposure being wrong, and I do cold exposure during it. How funny is that? Yeah, so I recorded an hour of content. It was painful. It cost me a lot of energy. And then for some reason, when I turn it on at home, only like 3 minutes from that hour saved. So I just lost an hour of recording, so I need to do it again. And the lighting conditions inside of my home are so terrible that I can make a podcast with a black screen, which is like 10% enjoyable for you to look at. And it will cost me like 100 megabytes on my device. Or I can make a video of terrible lighting conditions, which will be like 15% fun to look at for you. And that will cost me 10 gigabytes. So I'm making it with the podcast version. Sorry. So you might listen to this in the background while walking out. I don't know. Sorry. But I'm not recording it again. Okay, so where did I end? Yeah, detoxification. Let's say your body is trying to detox something through your skin. Like, you ate something toxic, or you have some toxic chemical inside of you, and your body says, you know what, I don't want to have that inside of me. So let's get it out through my skin. Let's have some acne or some eczema or something. Let's get this nonsense which shouldn't be in our body outside. So we become like 1% cleaner and 1% healthier. Well, if you put yourself to position of being in cold water, in which you will literally freeze to death if you don't leave soon, if you put yourself into the position of almost freezing to death every single day, then your body thinks, why should I worry about something so minuscule as getting some stuff outside through my skin if I'm literally about to freeze to death every single day? I have bigger fish to fry than some toxic stuff I want to get out of my skin. Let's just focus on not freezing to death. And when we stop getting into temperatures and positions in which we will literally freeze to death and die if we don't produce the heat fast enough, only then, when we stop dealing with this crap, then we can focus on something like detoxing something from the skin. So basically, you completely rape your body, and that makes it unable or absolutely uninterested in something like a detox, and it stops any kind of acne or anything like that which you have. And what I also heard is that doing cold exposure makes you waste white blood cells. I don't understand the technical aspect of it. It might not even be true. But what I've heard is that whenever you do cold exposure, you use up your white blood cells. And therefore, if you do it enough, then when your body wants to have acne, like, look, I have this toxic compound inside of myself, this heavy metal, this whatever, and I want to get it out. Well, I literally cannot get it out through acne because I literally do not possess the excess white blood cells that I could use to get rid of that thing. Or maybe cold exposure just makes your mitochondria in your skin better and in your digestion better, which then makes you not have acne. I don't know. Both of these might be true. I'm open to hearing sides from both. I'm open to hear arguments from both of these sides. It might be because your mitochondria work better and therefore you don't get acne. Or maybe it might be because it makes you unable to detox. It stops any kind of detoxification. Whatever the case, both of these are possible. I'm open to both of these. Now, what I want to talk about is that in the Excellent Health's video, he said something like this. When something bad is happening, which I don't like that is happening, like let's say my parents are not being very conscious, then I go and I take a contrast shower, which is like hot shower mixed with cold shower, and then I feel like nothing ever happened. Basically, he says something like, when something which you don't like happening happens, then when you go and take a cold shower, you feel more okay with it. That is incredibly depressing, honestly. Like, imagine you had a slave and you whipped him and you made the slave do something which he didn't want to do, and that slave hated you and he didn't want you to do the things you do. Well, instead of fighting back, he would go and he would take a cold shower, which would make him gasp for air for 10 seconds, and it would make him make really unpleasant facial expressions, and it would make him go into survival mode. It would raise his stress hormones, and afterwards, he would come out with a dopamine rush, and he would be like more okay with you enslaving him. Like, it would make him better at coping with you being his slave owner. Like, imagine government came and they gave me too much taxes, and it will be like, I wouldn't want them to do it, and they will just give me more taxes. And I would, instead of doing anything about it, I would go and I will take a cold shower, and then I will feel like, you know what? Okay, it's like nothing actually happened. Let's say someone disrespects me really bad, and instead of doing something about it, I will just take a cold shower, and I will be like, you know what? It's like nothing actually happened. That's just so sad and depressing. Like, something you don't like happens, and you punish yourself with a cold shower, and then you feel okay with that thing happening, more okay with that thing happening. Like, yes, it's true, the dopamine and the improved mood you get from that dopamine rush and adrenaline rush from doing the cold shower, it's true that it will make you better at coping with situations which you would otherwise find acceptable. But it's just so sad. It's like taking a drug to forget the conditions in which you are in. Expect healthier. It's like taking coffee, but cold showers don't destroy your gut like coffee. But yeah, coffee is excellent drug for making people accept conditions they would otherwise find unacceptable. And cold showers are kind of similar. Like you can get addicted doing cold showers to forget the reality in which you are. Like your life can be completely unpleasant, and you could encounter things you don't want to encounter, and you could be doing cold showers to forget it, to ignore it. And I know it because I did it when my mental health was completely destroyed. Like, I don't know how much got deleted and how much is left in the recording which I got. But I believe I told you that I was depressed. Hold on for a second. Yes, I believe I told you about getting addicted and needing colder and colder water to give me the dopamine rush. Well, yeah, I basically used cold exposure as a drug to deal with reality, which can happen to you as well if you abuse it. I was lonely and depressed, but then I just could do a cold shower, and I would go into survival mode, and I would feel like a wolf which is about to kill something, and I will go like, yeah, survival, fucking dopamine rush, yeah, let's go, let's go, let's go. But next day I would wake up, and I would still be lonely, and the feeling which made me try to run away and hide the feelings with the adrenaline rush from the cold shower and the dopamine, the underlying feeling would still be there, even when I was in middle of a dopamine rush from running outside shirtless in the winter. The underlying feeling of being lonely and depressed was still there, but I could literally feel it there. But I could also feel it being drowned by the dopamine and adrenaline rush from the cold exposure. It was literally being like drowned, like it was there. There was like a voice saying like, you're fucking depressed, your life is completely miserable and you hate it. And I was completely aware of it. But it was just that the dopamine rush from like, yeah, let's go, we are a werewolf, freezing our ass off, let's fucking go, survival, dopamine, adrenaline, whatever. This was just screaming way louder. But the underlying pain was still there, and I was just putting a mask over it. Another thing, I was heartbroken. Again, I could do a cold plunge and completely freeze my ass off, and then I would feel like, fuck yeah, I survived it, I have that behind me. Look at all of these beta endorphins making me feel good for surviving that cold plunge. Like, that's so cool. But I would still feel the pain and the feeling, because of which I did the cold exposure to run away from. Like, cold exposure is dangerous. I will talk about the value of using cold exposure to raise your dopamine deliberately, like using coffee, but more healthier version of it. But if you find yourself in some kind of reality which you cannot accept, if something bad happens to you and you don't like it, and you want to do a cold shower to give you a hormonal release to feel better, then that is literally escapism, and it's literally like taking drugs. It's healthier, but you are doing it to change your internal hormonal state, to run away from the way which you are feeling. You feel a certain way because your life is a certain way, and instead of changing your life, you go and you try to change the feeling instead of the life which changes the feelings, and that's temporary. And if you do it, then you grow a tolerance and you feel less of a response, and the more and the more you rely on it as well. So you can end up doing 5 cold showers a day, which might not hurt you, but which might hurt like 1 out of 100 people, to the extent it hurt me, and I don't want that to happen. So please watch yourselves, guys. Don't use cold showers in a way to escape from reality. It's very destructive. What is another thing which I can talk? Yeah, a random point. Jack Kruse once said, yeah, the more you get exposed to EMFs and Wi-Fi's, 5G towers, these things, which make your mitochondria work worse, the more you need to do cold exposure. Like, I don't actually think that Jack Kruse is controlled opposition, but when you tell me the more you are being harmed by EMFs and Wi-Fi's and so on, then the more you need to freeze to death. The more you are being harmed by Wi-Fi's, then the more you need to stress yourself. The more you need to get into temperatures in which you will literally die if your body doesn't produce heat fast enough. The more you need to experience pain and so on. The more you are being harmed by EMFs, the more you need to freeze. Look, I don't think Jack Kruse is controlled opposition. A lot of his stuff is really smart and I really admire it. But after hearing something like this, if you say that Jack Kruse is controlled opposition, then I don't agree with you, but I completely understand your point of view. Now, yeah, recently I did factor of cold exposure, and I've experienced a lot of negative effects. Like, excellent health. I mean, Jones talked about people who shouldn't do cold exposure, like people who feel drained or wake up in middle of the night after doing cold exposure and feeling bad and shaking and whatever. These people shouldn't do cold exposure. Interestingly enough, despite being someone who did fuck ton of cold exposure in the past, I experience pretty negative symptoms when I do cold exposure. Like, for example, I wake up in the middle of the night and I shake and I feel like really fucking bad. And often after doing real cold exposure, I feel, of course, insane dopamine rush. I feel great, like on drugs. But hours and hours after, I feel like a drop. I feel sad afterwards. Like, fuck. Come on. Yeah, I just don't feel great long term. I feel great after I do it for a few hours, maybe for the day. But on long enough timeline, it doesn't actually do that much positive. That also brings me like, if cold exposure is healthy, then how come there are people who experience negative effects? Negative effects from doing cold exposure, like waking up in the middle of the night, shaking, less energy and stuff like that. Like, if cold exposure is healthy, then why are there people who literally get harmed by doing cold exposure? Like, there aren't people who are being harmed by the sun. Like, you might get sunburned, but you will not wake up in middle of the night shaking or feel less energy or experience negative effects which some people do from cold exposure, from being in the sun. Maybe if you are in the tropics and it's too hot, it's 30 degrees and stuff like that, and yeah, but that's like, is it really caused by this? It's caused by heat, but like if you were in such a hot environment, even if there was no sun, then you would have the effects. Like if you get bunch of sunlight and you don't really get sunburned, and you drink and you don't get dehydrated, then you will not wake up in the middle of the night shaking and feeling bad, and you will not feel lower energy from doing like sunlight. And when you do sunlight, you don't like burn fat and make your muscle protein synthesis worse and stuff like I just don't understand like how could you equate cold exposure to sunlight? Like yeah, you don't. No one does. Like every quantum biologist says that yeah, sunlight is way healthier than cold. Cold exposure is just something you do if there's no sunlight as a last resort. But still, you can get really harmed by cold exposure. And if you overdo it, you can literally die. If you cannot do that with the sunlight. Yeah, you can overdo sunlight and you can die if you are in the Sahara Desert and dehydrate and something like that. But in cold exposure, you can literally die if you are 10 minutes in cold water or ice or something like that instead of 5, and then you don't get warm soon enough. I don't know, but it's my point is like it's 100 times easier to die doing cold exposure than it is from getting sunlight. I believe you get my point. Another point is, yeah, actually, I'm kind of done with shitting on cold exposure. Right now, I'm going to talk about the things which cold exposure is actually good for. Things that are right about cold exposure. Yeah, cold exposure, actually, newsflash, does have some benefits. And what are these? Well, first of all, your mitochondria. Now, Gotis recently made a reaction on Jack Cruz's interview with PSL Good Mindset, where he talked about mitochondria not even being real. Like, you literally need some chemicals, and he explained some chemical process during which you can observe mitochondria, but you don't know if those actually are the mitochondria. Like, they might not even be mitochondria, they might just be some cellular debris which you get from killing the cell with some chemical solution to observe it in the microscope or whatever. I got actually no fucking clue about anything of that. It might be true that mitochondria not be real. I don't fucking care. The arguments I present here were all, I had them when I presumed that mitochondria were real. I don't know, either they are real, and therefore what I'm going to say is going to be relevant, or they are not real. But then, still, I'm going to be talking about your body warming itself up, which is something your body does whether the mitochondria are real or not, so I don't actually care. So, it does make your mitochondria stronger and better at producing energy, aka heat. If you don't believe in mitochondria, then it makes your body better at producing energy, aka heat. When you cool yourself down by cold exposure, then your body needs to warm itself up. And it's like going to the gym. When you lift up a weight, the next time, your body will adapt. If it's stressful and painful to lift that weight, your body will adapt to make itself better at lifting that weight the next time. When you do cold exposure, and you have to warm yourself up and survive the cold, then your body will make itself better at surviving the cold and producing the heat to warm yourself up better. Now, if your cells become better and stronger at warming themselves up, creating more energy when it's required, then it's possible that they will become better at other things. Like if you have some organ and it gets cold and it needs to get warm again, then these organs, the cells of these organs becoming better at producing energy and heat to heat themselves up, then these cells might become better at doing other things as well. That might be the case. I can completely imagine that if you had one hand which was always warm in a glove and one hand which will be getting cold in the winter, then and needing to warm itself up, needing its cells to work harder to produce more energy to be able to warm themselves up. I can imagine that the hand, which is more often exposed to cold, will give a stronger handshake. It's completely possible. Even though when you do a workout and then you do cold exposure, then it decreases your protein muscle synthesis and it makes you recover your muscles less. It makes them grow less strong and less in size. Then still, if you just somewhat do it ambiently and your muscles are not if your muscles are not recovering from any stress and they just sometimes get exposed to cold, then yeah, sure, I believe they can become better by adapt by making themselves more effective and more adapted to producing heat. Like, your body is holistic. It's not that some cells become better at producing energy or heat, but not at nothing else. It surely influences them overall. And I believe if you had two people with the exact same diet and the exact same light environment, and one of them did one cold shower a week, and one of them did no cold exposure at all, then I would randomly guess that the guy who does one cold shower a week, because of his body having to become stronger to heat itself up faster, that body is probably stronger, more capable, and somewhat healthier than the guy who does no cold exposure. However, if there are two people and one of them does one cold shower a week and one of them does a hot bath, Agnes Wonderplanet style, a week, when he goes into water, which is 39 to 42 degrees, for, I don't know, 2 hours, and it's like 2 or 3 cold showers in between to cool down from the insanely hot water, then that guy is certainly going to be healthier than the guy who does the cold shower, even if he didn't have cold exposure in between. Because, yeah, forcing your cells or mitochondria to produce more heat might be somewhat healthy by doing cold exposure. But what if, instead of cooling yourself down to force your cells and the mitochondria to produce a bit more heat, which might be somewhat healthy, what if instead of that, you skipped one step and you just got warm in the first place? So you won't force your cells to warm you up. You will warm up your cells by doing a hot bath, and you will stay in insanely hot water for like 2 hours. That will make your body try to manage the temperature of your body, basically. And it's stressful. It's what I'm trying to say. Your mitochondria will create a fuck ton of biophotons in such a hot bath. A lot. It will make your cells and your body work really hard. And at the same time, it will help you to recover your wounds, because when you're really warm, then your tissues just heal better. And what's most important, you will sweat a lot. You will heat up your tissues to the bone. You will heat up your tissues in depth, and you will sweat a lot of stuff out, a lot of toxic stuff out. Like, if you believe that you do a cold shower that increases your cellular redox, your fourth phase of water, and that vaguely makes you detox some stuff, well, maybe that be the case, but it's nothing compared to being in a hot bath for 2 hours and sweating from the depths of your tissues for 2 hours straight. That will make you detox a lot more. There are stories of people doing something like that and then coughing something which smelled like some chemical coloring with which they worked 15 years ago with no mask. Like, you will have toxic chemicals stored in you for 15 years, and if you do this protocol with hot baths, you will fucking cough them out 15 years later. The amount of detoxification and healing a protocol like this just provides is just infinitely superior to doing any kind of cold exposure. And you can do cold exposure to cool yourself down in the middle of such a protocol. And it's actually pleasant. Like when you go and do cold exposure in the middle of the winter, yeah, the dopamine rush might make it feel like pleasant somewhat, but it's stressful and brutal. If you get out of a water in which you've been for an hour, which was like 40 degrees Celsius, and then you do a cold shower, it feels pleasant. It feels heavenly to cool down. It feels so good. It's like one of the best feelings in the world. That's a million times more enjoyable way to do cold exposure. Okay, so hot baths are better than cold exposure. But still, if you want to do cold exposure to make your mitochondria work better, then use the 80-20 rule. Don't get your entire body cold to make entire body's mitochondria better. Instead, make your face, your head, and your abdomen cold. Because you want to improve the mitochondria of your brain, because it's obvious, brain, then of your face, because you want your skin on your face to look better, I suppose, and then on the front of your torso, because that's where all of your organs are. However, you don't really need that much to put it on your back. There is still some contact with the organs if you cool your back, but it's million times more unpleasant to get cold on your back than on your front of your torso. And then you don't really need to get your limbs cold as well. You might, but it might make them stronger somewhat, who knows, but again, if you expose your limbs to hot, to warmth after working out, they will recover better and they heal better than if you put them to cold, which will decrease the protein muscle synthesis. So what I do is that when I do a cold shower, then most of the time I only make my face, head, and front of my torso cold, and I ignore the rest most of the time. Sometimes I do normal full body cold showers, sure, but yeah, if you want to improve your mitochondria, then the most essential things to cool down are your brain and front of your torso. Now, another thing which might be beneficial about cold exposure is that the same day you have a circadian cycle, like night day, your body has a circannual cycle, like winter, summer, spring, etc. And if you get exposed to cold, then supposedly you remind your body that it's actually winter and that it should produce different kinds of hormones. It should deal with some hormones in other way, which is in align there being less sunlight, and it should be prepared for different kind of food which isn't present during winter, and so on. I can completely understand that reminding your body that it's winter through exposing it to winter's temperature, that being beneficial for your body and your circannual cycle. I can completely understand that point. That doesn't mean I'm going to shill for bathing in a lake which is 5 degrees when it's snowing outside. I still do recommend some kind of cold exposure, but I will say what kind of cold exposure at the end of the video. But for now, yes, it's doing cold exposure to remind your body it's winter. That makes perfect sense. Sure. Then one of the most effective, how could I call it? Prominent benefits of cold exposure indeed is the dopamine rise. Like, yes, it's like a drug, and you don't want to do it often. But if you do cold shower 2 times a week when you feel down, when there are many clouds in the sky, and you just feel gray, and you have nothing going on in your life, and you just don't have any energy or something, then yeah, doing some cold shower will actually raise your dopamine for the day, and to make your life experience more enjoyable. Like, if you do 5 cold showers a day every day, and an ice bath and all of that, then the amount of stress you put on your body that's not worth the enjoyment of the dopamine rushes you get from it. But when you do like one cold shower a week or two cold showers a week, then the stress that you put on your body is actually worth the improved enjoyment of your life which you get for these few days. You don't do yourself that much harm, and if you don't do it very often, then you will not build a huge tolerance. If you do it often and you are like a coffee addict and you do cold showers daily, then it's likely that you will build a tolerance and that you will need colder and colder water to get the dopamine rush. You need colder and colder temperatures to feel as hype as you felt first time. But if you do it only like once a week like I do, then you will not really build that much of a tolerance, and you will always feel a strong response from doing the cold shower. The more you do it, the weaker they become. The less you do it, the higher response you have and the more fun they are. By fun I mean the response, the adrenaline rush, all of that. But when I do it, I don't do it like, oh yeah, it's just like having coffee, it's whatever, or oh yeah, it's healthy for my mitochondria, so I'm actually healing, so I can do it all the time, or oh yeah, I had a workout, so I will just do cold shower to boost myself up with energy. And no, I treat cold showers like a workout. Whenever I do them, I completely accept that I'm taking a small toll on my body. I treat them like a workout, and when I'm finished with them, I rest. I sleep. I make sure that I have enough time to sleep. I rest. I compensate. I chill out like I would after a workout. And I don't do cold showers when I'm tired. Like when I'm tired after a day of work, after a workout or anything, and I'm just sluggish, I'm tired, I don't want to do anything, then no, I will not do a cold shower. I will only do a cold shower if I'm already like okay, physically okay. If I'm tired and my muscles are sore, then I'm not going to use a cold shower to artificially, I hate English. I will not do a cold shower to pretend, because that would mask the pain of my sore muscles and my tired body. It will not give me energy. It will just adrenalize me, and it will mask the pain that I'm going through. And I do not want to mask any pain. I will just, when I'm already okay, when I'm already doing fine, I'm already rested and I'm not tired, then I will do the cold shower. Because I'm not masking anything. I'm having a normal physical performance type beat body, and I just fucking I got completely lost. Sorry, but you get the point. Like, imagine it like this. If you are something who uses caffeine and is very conscious, then when you didn't have enough sleep, then you don't take coffee. Sorry, again, bad example, but God. Like, when I'm tired because I didn't have enough sleep, or I worked very hard yesterday, I am not going to take a cold shower because I will be masking and pretending, and I don't want to do that. When I'm not tired and I'm physically completely okay, then I do a cold shower because I see cold showers as kind of stressful. And when I'm already tired or already exhausted from working from yesterday, let's say, then my body is already dealing with stress from these days back. It's not healthy to go and put another stress on it. But when I'm fine, then I can do another stressful activity. If I'm energized enough to go and work out, I'm energized enough to have a cold shower. If I wouldn't go and do hard physical labor because I'm tired, then I'm not going to do and have a cold shower. I believe I drilled the point in way more than was necessary, and you got bored, and you probably skipped around because of it. Sorry. Okay. Then the last benefit of cold exposure is practical. In the past, in the past, this year, I found out I'm very, very heat adapted. I am, unironically, and I'm not boasting, it's just pure fact. I'm able to work in the middle of the summer, in the middle of noon, for hours, shirtless, in the sun, not in the shade, and be fine with it, as long as I'm hydrating well. But I can see just people fainting and being like, oh my god, it's so fucking hot, this is disgusting. And when people are like that, I prefer to sit outside in the sun than in the shade. Like, I almost never experience it being more pleasant to be in the shade than in the sunshine, even when I'm working hard physically in the middle of the summer. It's just brutal how heat adapted I am, thanks to eating raw foods only. But that had a downside. I was not cold adapted at all. If there was a small cloud in the middle of the summer over the sun and a small wind started blowing, then I would feel cold, and I would literally feel offended by that cold, and it would feel extremely unpleasant. The amount of unpleasantness I experienced from experiencing any kind of cold made my life way less fun. And if you live in a climate where white people with blue eyes and blonde hair like I do, then your life will be way less fun if you are not in any way cold adapted. Like, life is way more fun now that I can tolerate cold. When I can be outside and when cold wind starts to blow at me, I'm fine with it. When I can be outside and work outside for hours in negative degrees and I feel fine. I'm no longer like pussy, afraid of the cold. Like, I started doing to some cold exposure, and that made me way more resilient to cold than people around me, and that makes life in this climate way more enjoyable and way less annoying if you can accept the cold. Even if cold exposure had zero health benefits, then being able to tolerate cold more will make your life just way more fun and will improve the quality of your life to an extent of doing cold exposure being absolutely worth it. It's just so much more fun to wear less clothing than other people. Like, now I wear jacket and so on, but like in the fall when it was sunny, I could be walking outside shirtless in shorts when people were wearing jackets and everything. And that was like 12 degrees Celsius and I was fine with it. Or when I work on a farm physically, then I can have just thin cotton sweater. Or I can work in disgusting, strong, cold northern Viking winds for hours in like 0 degrees and have my hands cold and everything. And feel okay and be completely able to work in that environment thanks to being cold adapted. It's fun. It's way more fun to be cold adapted. Now, there are people like Jones from Excellent Health who is cold adapted to the point of being able to supposedly walk outside in the winter in Sweden shirtless and to not feel like it's cold at all. I believe him. I believe that it's completely possible to be that cold adapted. However, that's absolutely not fucking necessary. Like, let's hear this analogy, which I thought of. being able to walk outside in less clothing and to work outside in winter without feeling like you're dying and to be okay with your hands being cold and not experiencing pain from it. And basic stuff like this, like sunning your abdomen in middle of December when it's sunny and not feel like you're getting frostbite or something. These things are like being able to bench press 80 kilograms in the gym. But being able to walk outside shirtless in Sweden in winter and not feel like it's cold. That's like bench pressing 240 kilograms. It's completely unnecessary. You want to have some kind of cold adaptation, some kind of basic cold adaptation to make your life fun. But being this cold adapted is absolutely unnecessary and it's hard to achieve. That's literally the difference between 80 kilograms and 240 kilograms kg bench press. Okay, you might be cold adapted faster than achieving that weight of bench press, but still, it's unnecessary. You don't need to be that cold adapted. It's also going to being able to bench press 80 kilograms will not really harm you, but in order to adapt yourself to bench press 240 kilograms, or in order to be adapted to the Swedish winter, shirtless, outside, whatever, it's going to take a toll on your body. Now, as I told you, I still do encourage some kind of cold exposure. It's better, no cold exposure is probably better than too much. But some cold exposure is still better than no cold exposure. But what cold exposure do I recommend? Well, I don't recommend that you go swim in a lake in the middle of the winter, which has ice on, and then walk shirtless back home. Or I don't recommend walking shirtless outside in the forest and making wolf sounds on the full moon in the winter. No. What I recommend is like look at yourself. You are probably white. You probably live in Europe, in countries where it's snowing and stuff like that. You are supposed to do some cold exposure. But not in this autistic, biohacking way, where you deliberately make yourself freeze to death, almost, and then just barely make it out. Look, you are meant to go and do stuff outside in the snow with no gloves on, and then your hands get like red and hurt a bit. You're supposed to do something with your gloves, and then your gloves get cold and wet from the sweat. You are supposed to like throw snowballs with your friends and get hit with a snowball to your face, or have a friend get cold snow behind your back. You are supposed to like walk uphill, and then you start feeling a bit hot, a bit warm, and a bit sweaty. So you take off your jacket and your sweater, and you are standing uphill in wind, in very cold weather, in only a shirt, but it's pleasant. It's very cold, but it's pleasant because you are cooling down. You are supposed to like, it's sunny in the middle of the winter, so you take off your shirt, you maybe keep your jacket on your back, but you sun your abdomen in the middle of the winter and your abdomen is getting cold. You are supposed to like eat raw meat by your hands outside in the winter, so your hands are really cold. You are supposed to get home and you are completely wet and sweaty from being outside and in the snow. You understand what I'm trying to say. You live life like a normal human being, being warm, but you don't really... but sometimes you get cold. Like, you do human amount of cold exposure. You do human cold exposure. Like, you feel very warm in your winter clothing. You get it off, and you cool yourself down in a shirt while it's minus degrees outside. That's the kind of cold exposure you do. Then you get too cold and you get your clothes back on. Or you walk in your shoes, winter shoes, and your feet start to feel too warm and you start to sweat. So you take off your socks and your shoes and you put them in the snow so they cool down. Or you work on a farm and you fill the containers with water and you get your hands wet or you put some cold water on your face. You get the thing. Like telling you to do cold exposure and to embrace the cold and the elements. But not to the point of you literally being in a position in which you would literally freeze to death if you stayed too long in there. Or if you do, like cooling down in a shirt, like do cold exposure as long as it's pleasant. Like, yes, sometimes I do cold exposure to the point of it being unpleasant, but it's on completely different level than doing an ice bath. Like a pro tip, which I've heard, is that you know about the mammalian dive reflex. Like when you open your eyes underwater and you have your face underwater, then you cannot breathe because you're underwater and your body doesn't want you to breathe, or something along those lines, and your heart rate slows down for some reason. And I actually had a cool experience with it that I had something stuck in my eye, and the coworker put water in my eye to try to wash it out. And when that happened, I literally couldn't breathe, or couldn't breathe through my nose or something, because my body thought I was underwater and it didn't want me to breathe. So similar thing works with cold exposure. When you put cold water on your face, then that supposedly makes something with your body, and it makes your body feel that your entire body might be in cold water or something. It basically makes you more adapted to cold weather. So if you only make your face cold, first, it's not stressful. It might hurt a bit if you put your forehead inside, but if you put cold water on your face or your face in cold water, it barely hurts, it's not stressful, you don't feel any adrenaline shock, and you supposedly make your whole body more adapted at handling cold. And I expose my face very often to cold water. Like I work on a farm and every day I put cold water from the containers for the animals on my hands and on my face. And since doing that, I am very cold adapted. I can handle much more cold than all people around me with less clothing. Yeah. Also, besides doing this kind of human cold exposure, you can sometimes do like a ice bath or something. Like let's say you go with your friends and you go and have an ice bath in the middle of a lake, and then you warm yourself up in warm clothing and stuff. And then you have a party and you all enjoy yourselves with your higher dopamine from it. Or you go and you take a cold shower, and because you have a fireplace inside your home and you want to experience being cold and then warming yourself up by the fire. Or let's say you had a workout and or you came back from work and you sweat and you feel extremely warm and you want to cool down, so you do a cold shower, even though it's pretty unpleasant, but you get basically cold. You get what I'm trying to say here. Stay warm, feel pleasantly warm, seek a comfortable temperature, and sometimes get cold when you want to, even if it's unpleasant. Like, be human. Do human cold exposure. Expose yourself to cold like a white Aryan person, but don't do cold exposure 5 times a day. Like these quantum biologist people saying, "Oh yeah, you need a cold shower and you need 5 cold plunges every week," and all of that's just so excessive. Like stop, chill out, or you know what? Don't chill out. You are chilling too much. Warm out, bro. Yeah, do human cold exposure. I don't even know how to explain it. I just do it intuitively. Like, I walk with something heavy. I start sweating, so I take off my clothes, and I'm only in a shirt in very cold weather, and I'm doing that, cooling down. And when I get too cool, I get my clothes back on. And when my feet sweat, I put them in cold water, and sometimes I put cold water on my face. I just go through life and I do it completely intuitively and randomly as my body wants me to. And sometimes I go and have a cold shower once or twice a week. And then randomly once a month I go into cold water outside. Just just listen to your body. Like force yourself to do some cold showers and cold exposure. Or go outside in less clothing so your body knows what it is like to be cold in the first place. And after you establish some noob gains and some baseline with your body experiencing cold, then after that, after your body knows what it is like to be cold, don't force yourself to be cold, but listen to your body when it tells you to be cold, randomly and intuitively. But if your body tells you to have 5 cold showers a day, then stop listening to your body because then you are probably addicted. Yeah. Like most of the time, when I do cold exposure, I don't even get an adrenaline rush from it. It's like get your face wet, get your hands wet, stuff which don't completely change your hormones. Just getting slightly wet on some parts of your body, which are exposed to the environment. Yeah. I might be glad that I lost the recording because doing it again comfortably in this podcast version while not freezing to death and at the same time trying to be faster than my phone battery dying, it makes the video much better, I think. Even though right now you are probably looking at a black screen or something like that. Yeah, but at least you are not looking at the screen and you are getting less blue light in. That's good, I think. Yeah, I think this is all, folks. I just want to address something. I have nothing against excellent health. He's an awesome guy. I watched like almost all of his videos, and nearly everything he talks about is correct. If you follow his advice, you will be better off. And I'm glad that he doesn't really talk about diet all the time. Like there are so many people in the space talking about diet that it's about time that someone goes and talks about the other aspects of health, like EMF, sunlight, breathing, and so on, like Jones did. I'm glad he does that. Someone had to come along and do that, and he was that someone. Now, I had an interview with Solar Youth on my channel and I deleted it. Why? Is it because I have some grudge against him? No. It's because it was literally his video, his interview, his footage. He edited it, he made the timestamps, he did everything. It's his video, and I only took the file and I re-uploaded it. It seemed very unprofessional for me, and it seemed cheap, and I didn't want to have that on my channel because it was just too cheap. But that interview with Jones still exists, and it's on his channel. It's called like "Why Do You Dream More When You're Healthy?" and it has mushrooms on thumbnail. The interview still exists. I wouldn't delete it if it was the only if it was only video of the interview on the internet. I deleted it because it's on his channel and it's his video. It's still a cool interview, yeah. So nothing against Jones. I just disagreed with the information he gave out about cold exposure. Well, not completely, but major aspects of it, and I wanted to get that out. Otherwise, he's a cool person. Now, last thing I might say is that second link in the description, there's a community of people who eat raw meat. There's almost 30 of us, and you might want to check it out. The goal for our community is to host real-life primal meetups in the countries where we live. And there is more stuff to it. You can check it out. It's paid, it's like $2 a month, maybe it's $3 by now. Like, if you can get in, well, it's $2 a month, then yeah, cool. But if you get in when it's $3 a month, you know what? It's actually too expensive at that point. Like, yeah, only join if it's $2. If it's 3 or more, yeah, forget it. It's not worth it anymore. Whatever. So, eat raw meat, wear blue blockers, and grow your herald.
Okay, how are you? Are you having a good day today?
A very good day, thank you.
Fantastic.
It's still early in the day here.
Oh, great. And the weather is pretty good.
It's sunshiny today in a clear sky.